Empathy is traditionally viewed as the bedrock of human connection, a pro-social trait that binds societies and fosters altruism. To understand and intimately feel someone else's pain is presumably to be incapable of intentionally inflicting it. But the architecture of human psychology does not always adhere to such neat binaries. The capacity to deeply comprehend another person's emotional landscape can be entirely decoupled from the moral imperative to protect it. In 2020, a study conducted at Nottingham Trent University formalized a psychological profile that challenged the historical assumption that dark personalities were defined exclusively by an absence of empathy. This is the phenomenon of the dark empath. This chart displays the distribution of personality profiles identified in the study. While the traditional low empathy dark triad makes up 13% of the sample, the dark empath cohort represents nearly 1/5 of the study population at 19.3%. Traditional psychopathic profiles are often associated with a lack of the neurological hardware required to process complex emotion. Dark empaths, however, utilize a tuned emotional radar to navigate and influence their environment, using their understanding of human vulnerability specifically to locate a target. Because modern corporate environments prioritize emotional intelligence in leadership, they unwittingly create an ideal setting for these individuals to operate. Their ability to read a room provides the perfect camouflage for covert manipulation. To understand this construct, we must recognize empathy is not a monolithic trait. It is a dual-process system consisting of distinct cognitive and affective components. Cognitive empathy is an intellectual capacity. It involves perspective-taking and the ability to map another person's mental and emotional state. Affective empathy is the capacity to resonate on an emotional level, to vicariously share feelings through emotional contagion. The dark empath maintains high cognitive empathy, but their affective empathy is controlled. They accurately read distress without being burdened by the emotional consequences of acting upon it. This creates an individual who possesses a detailed map of human vulnerability, but lacks the internal guardrails that would prevent them from exploiting it for personal gain. In practice, this manifests as a 3-step process known as vulnerability mining. Phase 1 involves observation and mirroring. The dark empath uses cognitive empathy to identify subtle emotional cues, acting as a supportive colleague to gather data on a target's insecurities. By reflecting these identified vulnerabilities back to the target, the dark empath bypasses traditional social defenses. This creates rapid, manufactured intimacy that prompts the target to lower their professional boundaries. Once dependency is established, the collected data is weaponized. If the target attempts to set a boundary, the dark empath leverages that shared personal history to induce guilt or pathologize the target's behavior. This exploitation often takes the form of disingenuous manipulation, using false flattery or feigned concern to ensure compliance, or relational aggression, where they use their social insight to fracture a target's reputation. For the targeted victim, the experience was real in its accuracy, but entirely counterfeit in its intent. Beyond individual targets, how does a dark empath react to a genuinely healthy, mutually supportive team? Dr. Jane Hyde's research into workplace dynamics reveals that these individuals prioritize agentic pursuits, the acquisition of autonomous power and status, over communal well-being. In a highly cohesive team, individuals rely on one another for support, which reduces the power imbalances a manipulator needs to maintain control. Because a unified group fundamentally limits their leverage, the dark empath will actively work to fracture that team cohesion. They use their emotional insight to introduce paranoia, play colleagues against one another, and position themselves as the necessary mediator or authority. By dismantling the organic trust of the group, the dark empath ensures that colleagues are isolated, making them easier to manage, and ensuring the predator remains the indispensable center of the office ecosystem. Traditional conflict resolution strategies, like open communication or sharing how you feel, are designed for individuals who possess affective empathy. Against a dark empath, these strategies are ineffective. In fact, attempting to talk it out merely provides the individual with a new set of emotional data points to use against you in future interactions. The primary defense is information protection. Severely limit the personal data, fears, and historical traumas you share in professional settings. This starves the dark empath of the raw materials required for manipulation. When interaction is unavoidable, many psychologists recommend the gray rock method. This involves being as emotionally unresponsive and boring as possible, responding only with brief, neutral, and factual statements. Additionally, victims must utilize reality checking with trusted third parties outside the environment. This helps combat the effects of gaslighting and maintains an objective record of the manipulator's behavioral patterns. These protocols neutralize the threat by cutting off the emotional reactivity that dark empath uses as a source of influence. Understanding the dark empath doesn't mean we should become cynical about the concept of empathy itself. Rather, it requires a maturation of our social awareness. We must learn to distinguish between the empathy that seeks to build and the empathy that seeks to conquer. If you found this analysis helpful, please subscribe and share this video with a colleague who might be navigating a complex workplace environment. We've included a resource in the description for those looking for more detailed strategies on maintaining professional boundaries. To protect our communities and workplaces, we must recognize the difference between the empathy that heals and the dark empathy that solely seeks to conquer.